Yeah, good evening once again. Thank you all for your patience. Okay, to join me. In actual fact, I had to restart the machine because it was really misbehaving. So, like I said, the focus of today's class is to look at some measures or some statistics under various areas like health, employment. We look at banking, we look at trade, and we'll look at transport. Okay, to look at some patterns and trends within these various sectors. And then also look at one very interesting argument on how some of these things or some of these indices and statistics come together, to influence policies that are taken at what the government level. Okay, now let's begin. Yeah, so the days we've been looking at the concept of national income, like GDP. Okay, and whilst we're looking at the real and nominal GDP, we also did mention the concept of inflation. Okay, and I'm sure with your knowledge in economics, you should also know about the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, as well as the Producer Price Index. Okay, and since we've not done that, let me just touch on it. CPI looks at what relative price changes, okay, from a consumption point of view, okay. So we look at the prices at the consumer end, whilst PPI looks at the prices of goods and services, okay, relative price changes of goods and services from a production point of view, okay. So how much does the producer spend, and at the end, the price in the market, okay, for the consumer who went to see GDP and how to estimate the national income, and so on. Then when we come to the aspect of demography, we are looking at how many males do we have, how many females have, how many are age, okay, how many educated, what are the classes of infantiles do we have, youth do we have, I mean, among these youth, okay, which people have been. So we have a lot of issues when it comes to demography. You look at birth rates and all that under demography. Then we also talk about social issues, okay, social matters, and environmental, which key among them is the issues of health. So when we talk about measuring the state of the nation, we are looking at it from all aspects, okay, including health, including the economic state. Okay, we are looking at the demographic status, okay, the rate at which our population is rising. Should also be an issue to us. So if the population keeps rising and per the square or per the hectares of land we have, do we have cause for concern? And do we need to implement a policy in terms of our building structures? Okay, because if our population is rising very high, and we look at the area available to the nation, okay, then it means that very soon it's going to be very difficult to even find a land for people to live on. So there will be need for us to implement some policies, okay. So that is the first use of economic, or let's say statistics, okay, health, economic, official statistics on these various areas. Then two, for comparing the economic or health status of one country with another, okay. So as we are talking about this, there is also need for us to do some comparison, okay. So we are able to tell what progress have been made, okay, compared to other nations. So when we do comparison with other nations like Brazil and other nations, okay, as way back in the 1984s, we were on the same status, but now some of these countries have gone past us, okay, and they are doing very well. They've moved from the realm of developing countries to middle income countries, and they are doing very well. So you always want to compare your economic progress, your health progress, okay, vis-a-vis other nations. Now, point three, for comparison of economic health status in different groups within the same population. So at times we need to make group sensitive policies, okay? Yeah, so if we are looking at issues of pregnancy, we may want to look at pregnancy uh, at a very early age, okay, and pregnancy at some other ages, and very early ages, which are the teenage ages, become a concern for the nation. Okay, then we talk about issues of certain type of diseases which affect predominantly, let's say, mothers and children. Okay, then we also talk about issues of economy like youth, okay, unemployment. Okay, unemployment is generally an issue, but when it comes to youth employment, it is really a serious issue because the trends are higher as compared to unemployment for non-youth and other, okay, members within the population. Okay, then point four, for planning health administration or basic, I mean, general administration in various fields. Okay, good. So how many personnel do we need? Okay, what are some of the uh, strategies to put in place in terms of training? If there are shortfalls, okay, in various areas, then we need to what, build up our personnel to address some of those shortfalls. Point five, to promote what, social, economic, demographic, and environmental policies formulation. Okay, so we need this statistics, this trend for policy formulation. Okay, so consistency in our inflation rates and other economic measures are also going to lead toward bank lending policies. Okay, so, and it also affects what, the stability of the nation and the rate at which investors want to come and even invest within our world, our country. Okay, good. Step point six, for evaluating the progress, success or failure of policy strategies and programs that have been implemented by governments. Okay, so if we had issues and some policies have been put in place, okay, government policies have been put in place as interventional measures, okay, for example, to stop the cedi depreciation, or investment has been made into the educational sector, okay, in terms of purchasing infrastructure, or in terms of policies to increase what, the salaries or wages of workers, so as to get them what, motivated to improve upon learning. In the long run, we need these statistics to check. So once we get statistics on educational progress or success in WASI over the years, we're able to tell whether these policies in terms of investing into infrastructure within schools has improved the performances, okay, within schools. Then point seven, we are saying for further research into explanatory variables, okay, for us as academicians and researchers, we need these health statistics to help us to conduct further research in terms of their relationship, their interventions, and in terms of how interventional methods, okay, do influence these factors. And today we'll be looking at one very exciting research from Dr. Said, okay, along the line. Then point eight, well, one of the uses of health, economic, and demographic statistics in general Okay, it's for predictions. Okay, trying to predict into the future. We want to know what is going to happen when we put measures A, B, C in place, or interventions A, B, C in place. What should we expect at the end of the day? Or given the current patterns we are expecting, or given the current population rise and fertility rates, how many people do we expect within our country within, say, the next 10 years? So all of these statistics help us to what, make predictions, okay, regarding socio-economic, demographic, environmental issues within our country. Good. Now, one of the first things we want to talk about, which relates to the economic, okay, area, is that unemployment, okay, and particularly unemployment. We'll just look at some patterns within the country. Then along the line, we're going to switch on to one very interesting presentation and research by a very sound researcher. Okay, so we have one on what is employment. We are looking at employment. We all know what employment is, and one of the key measures which we make use of when it comes to employment is the employment rate, which is basically defined as the extent to which um, okay, yeah, so we define employment rates as the measure of the extent to which available labor resources, okay, are being used, and they are usually calculated as the ratio of employed to working age population. Okay, good. Now, we are saying that they are sensitive to economic cycles. Okay, they are sensitive to economic cycles, but in the longer term, they are significantly affected by government what policies. Okay, particularly investment in higher education and income, okay, support, and by policies that facilitate employment of women and disadvantaged groups. Okay, so these policies made by governments in the long run hugely affect employment rates. Okay, good. And you see more when we get to the discussion between inflation, GDPs, and certain policies and unemployment rates. Okay, you are going to see the pattern very clearly. So we are saying that even though they are affected by economic cycles, once inflation goes up, okay, the rate at which people can produce, okay, is going to also go down, meaning that the GDP, okay, is also going to go down once inflation goes up. And if GDP goes down, it means less people, less production is being what made in the country, which means that more people are going to be less unemployed. Okay, once we have low production, then low production within the various sectors of the economy. Okay, majority of which is within the private sector. Okay, then the private person or businessman, okay, will not also be willing to employ more workers. So it means in the long run, more people are going to be what, affected in terms of their employment. So employment rates, like we are saying, are sensitive to what, economic cycles. Okay, measured using various what, statistics or indicators. Now, the next point, we are saying that employed people, okay, here we are just defining what we mean by that. So employed people are those age 15 or over who report that they have worked in gainful employment for at least 1 hour in the previous work, or who had a job but were absent from work during the reference week. And These definitions, okay, differ from nation to nation, and over time are also revised, okay? So what we mean by employment is change from uh, one time to the other, okay? They are reviewed occasionally. Mm. So sometimes this also affects the trends that we see in the employment rates. Now, that is another definition, okay? When we talk about working age population, we are referring to those between 15 and 64, okay? And we say that this indicator is seasonally adjusted, and it is measured in terms of thousands persons age 15 and over, and in the numbers of employed persons age 15 to 64 as a percentage of the working age population. Good. Now, when we're talking about employment, okay, within statistical or official reports, okay, which we'll look at one, okay, today's class is going to be more of a technical one. We'll go to the Ghana labor, okay, survey, okay, report, and by the Ghana Statistical Service, and then look at some of the patterns that are presented there. So when it comes to official statistics in terms of employment, we are usually interested in employment by some characteristics, okay, which helps in policy formulation. And some of those characteristics are employment by age grouping, okay, employment by educational level. So if we went to school, then what employment are we engaged in, okay, so that we formulate right appropriate policies based on the skill level of individuals within our employment sector. Then we talk about employment by activities. What trade is being performed, given the skills that they obtain from their various institutions. We also talk about issues of self-employed as against being employed by a civil servant or being employed by the government. Then we have part-time employment, which has become quite an interesting issue, okay, given the conditions in the country and other developing countries. Okay, a lot of people are engaged in the part-time employment just to make end meet. Okay, then we also have issues regarding labor force forecast. Okay, good. And we'll be looking at some of those patterns over the years. But like I said, we'll also be looking at the labor force, okay, report or survey. Now, what we see here is a bar chart or a chart, okay, indicating what the employment in the country across various sectors. Where we are looking at, blue represents agriculture, black represents the industry, and ash represents services, which are the three main sectors, okay, in Ghana. So when we look at it from 2009, we can see a decreasing trend for agriculture, okay, all the way to 2019. The contribution of agriculture to our, okay, employment within the country is just about 29.75%, okay, yeah, and that's correlates with agricultural production in the country, okay, from the same period. Okay, so you can tell that now Ghana is no more an agrarian economy, okay, because we are producing less, and agriculture is not the major contributor of our income anymore, okay, and that is why we are having, okay, more lesser people being employed in the sectors of agriculture. Okay, so many arguments can be made, okay, environmental issues in terms of programs which are being run, educational programs, issues about industrialization of agriculture in the country, and so on and so forth. Okay, agricultural, even existing agricultural policies in terms of land acquisition and all that, okay, could be factors contributing to this downward trend of our okay, employment within the agricultural sector. Okay, now when it comes to the area of industry, okay, sorry, so we can also see that industry keeps rising, okay, so we seem to be doing it right when it comes to industry, where we are grown from 13.87% all the way to 21% as at 2019. Okay, but there is more to be done. Okay, yes. Then we talk about services, which is increasingly okay rising. So when we look at services, we've moved all the way from 34.62 to 49.21%. Okay, which means that Ghana is rendering more services in terms of communication, in terms of delivery, in terms of yeah, so many other services, okay, are being rendered, and that is accounting for what? More employment within the services sector. Good. Now, and I believe the sources too have been stated there. Slide. Good. This is another which I took from the Ghana Statistical Service report on the labor survey report. Okay, so here is a classification in terms of gender, okay, or by sex, okay, employment within the various sectors. So when we look at the general trend is we have more males employed than females, okay, with a total of 60.3 for male, okay, as vis-a-vis 39.7 for females as in 2015, okay, and generally we can see that in agriculture we seem to have very high disproportionate employment rates for males as compared to females, with a very low proportion of females in agriculture. Okay, whereas when it comes to services, we tend to have more females within the services, okay, sector. Moving on, we have statistics on employment for large, medium, small, and micro scale businesses, and the type of ownership as to whether they are state owned and private owned. And clearly, we could see that the private sector is employing a very huge, okay, number of workers in the country. Okay, so as at 2015 labor survey report, okay, we can see the huge contribution of the private sector. The government sector can only employ approximately in total, we are looking at less than 1 million, okay, whilst in the private sector, we're having a very large, okay, contribution, a large percentage or proportion of people employed within the various sectors. And it also indicates the proportion within what the micro, small, medium, and large scale. Okay, and clearly we can see per the graphs that whereas the state-owned should tend to employ more people within the medium and the large, okay, we have more people in the private sector being, or more businesses within the private sector being of the form of the micro and then the small scale businesses. Okay, so most people within the private sectors are working in the micro and small scale businesses. Okay, so we have trends in of unemployment in Ghana, okay, indicated here. And like I said, the definition for unemployment, okay, is also a contributing factor. Now, when we look at it, the differences are not too much. Highest is 6.8, and we look at the lowest in that is 2019 as 4.1. Okay, so unemployment rates seem to have generally dropped from 2016 to 2019. Okay, but there has been let's say a significant rise from 2019, okay, all the way to 2020, and I think we understand the reason why. Okay, that is basically due to COVID crisis or epidemic. Okay, a lot of people have lost their jobs, and the country is now, in fact, people are now jobs have now opened, and well, hopefully this trend is going to change once again. We expect a downward pattern in terms of what unemployment within the country. Okay. Now, the source has also been indicated. This is coming from the International Labour Organization. Okay, and I'll be, like I said, I'll be taking you to a very nice report in terms of this unemployment and employment issues and how they affect government policies. Now, before we get to banking, let me go and share the report on unemployment and we see the arguments that try to think around it also for a while. Okay, as researchers. So I give to Dr. Said, okay, for strategies in ensuring strong base economic growth in Ghana. Yeah, so he analyzes what the economic performance of the country from way back to 2017. Okay, so he says that he says in 2017 the economy saw a strong growth performance. However, this growth almost entirely came from the oil sector. Okay, and he explains why it was so. He says the traditional non-oil sector continues to grow at a comparatively low rate. So what he's saying here is the GDP we are seeing, the rise in GDP is basically due to what? The growth in the oil sector, but other sectors aside the oil, okay, it's really not growing at the rate we expect. And as a consequence, unemployment, particularly among the youth, is soaring. Okay, why? Because it is these companies that employ what dominant proportion of the youth. The oil sector does not employ that much. So if oil is contributing to our GDP and non-oil is not performing well, then obviously there is going to be high rate of what unemployment within the country. Now, he explains that to assure significant generation of jobs and minimize the problem of unemployment, strong base economic growth is critically needed. Okay, so these are some recommendations made, but these recommendations were